my part of Europe, this will be the time for an after-dinner speech. And there are usually very different expectations for after-dinner speeches. So I will try to follow the 3 Bs of presenting: be brief, actually be bold, be brief, be gone. So Natalie said earlier that because her boss was ill, she was able to present some of her own work. I think in this instance I have to confess that most of the work that I will talk about now has been piloted by my boss, Ilona Rauter, who is the director of the ESPON EGTC, and of course implemented by our team of in-house experts and carried out by our large network of partners. But I will try to be brief. I will share 3 bits of information with you if you can bear with me. The first one is a little plug. So we have published our ESPON perspective on the future of post-2020 cohesion policy. This is really our contribution to what are the main kind of patterns and challenges that will shape territorial development in the future. So we're looking at aging, we're looking at demographic changes, we're looking at economic growth, we're looking at SMEs and FDI. So the review provides evidence on territorial interdependence, and I think what is really clear is that the issues that concern territorial development need cooperation between territorial entities. And this really requires an effective policy response. The return to a greater degree of territorial fragmentation would be negative, essentially, both economically, environmentally, and socially. We try to model this looking at the impact on GDP of European disintegration, and all regions would be worse off, even though, relatively speaking, some would be better off compared to the European average. So our territorial review is full of detailed evidence and examples. I just want to mention one, which is FDI in the Eurozone region. This is a good example of how cross-border cooperation can be an avenue to increase market potential for companies. And in this particular case of Greater Copenhagen and the Skåne region, it is very much integrated in regional and national development goals. My second example was thankfully already covered by Martin earlier, which is the hospital in Badajoz, so I can skip that. Just to briefly say, based on this evidence, what are the conclusions that we have reached for post-2020? Mainstreaming territorial cooperation in the European structural investment funds should really be thoroughly considered, and cross-border should not be restricted to Interreg programs and funding only, but should really be mainstreamed across the other programs. So it's really about going beyond Interreg. Eligible regions and cities should be encouraged to include territorial cooperation in their investment frameworks. Member states, regions and cities should plan to implement investment initiatives at functional geographical levels. This is really one of the key findings, that functional areas are absolutely key. In terms of kind of guidance for kind of future medium to long-term strategies, it is really about policy opportunities within local functional areas, and this includes cross-border areas. I just want to perhaps briefly mention 3. All of these are covered in the report. But in the case of SMEs, for example, cross-border cooperation is really key to allow companies to grow, to support them in developing their markets cross-border. In terms of renewable energy, cross-border cooperation is key if you want to have a secure, sustainable energy future in Europe. We need to look beyond our regions in terms of production and supply and demand of renewable energy, wind and solar. Cooperation is really key. And then of course also for transport services, I think this is of course extensively covered in cross-border cooperation, but if we think about the future of mobility and if we think about autonomous vehicles, if these autonomous vehicles are to drive across national borders, cross-border cooperation is absolutely essential. So at the end, just 3 things I want to tell you about what we're doing going forward, also to support cross-border evidence production and cross-border interactions and cooperation. We're starting a project next month on cross-border public services, where we're looking at cross-border service provision across Europe, and looking specifically at the problems and needs to be addressed by cross-border services. This is one of our targeted analysis, and it will kick off in November, and the results will be available by the end of next year. We have another targeted analysis starting early next year, which is about piloting territorial impact assessment for cross-border cooperation. This is an ex-post TIA, and there it's both development of a methodology and piloting this methodology in our stakeholder territories, and this will be launched in 2018. Then some of you might be familiar with our territorial impact assessment tool. This will be upgraded next year also to include cross-border TIA, and we will also be investing time and resources into developing data and indicators together, of course, with our partners. So those are the things that are in the pipeline for us. I hope I was brief enough. Thank you very much, and I think I'm the last one, so we can all head off to dinner. Thank you.